Hello, Braves country. It's Coach Ken Anderson coming to you for Hardcore Braves. And today we have our Coach's Corner special exclusive. I've got co-host Andrew and Erin. Today we welcome Grant Mcauley. Grant, how you doing today?
Doing well. Thank you guys for having me. Looking forward to talking about a much improved Braves team. It's been a lot of fun the first couple of months.
It has. How about you, Erin?
Yeah, definitely. I'm loving this season compared to last season for sure.
Andrew, you doing all right today?
Yeah, I'm doing well. It's like your every other Monday, a lot of work, but it's glad to see this team playing well this year. Really great to see them keep continuing to building and grow.
Yeah, it's a very exciting 2026, and every Braves fan has earned it, Grant. The last year was probably one of the most miserable I've sat through as a now 38-year season ticket holder. That was really disappointing to be in the ballpark. But you know about Grant Mcauley, y'all know him. He is one of my favorite follows all across social media. You can get him at From the Diamond podcast. Listen to that. This time had an interview with Dom Smith and David Justice. Excellent. He's also on 92.9 The Game. He's a reporter for them, so jump on them. He's on there, and then he does writing for at Battery Power. How are your endeavors going, Grant?
Well, they're going a lot better this year, trying to just stay busy, but also enjoy what has been a much improved season over last year. And I think last year was so disappointing because it just felt like just such an outlier from what we were used to. And it just seemed like at some point this had been a team that was going to get it going. And usually June was that time. And that just didn't happen last year. So very happy to bid adieu to last year's struggles and welcome back a Braves team that has looked complete offensively. It's looked complete pitching-wise, even though they haven't had health on both sides of those yet, and has even improved defensively. So pretty much every box you can check, the Braves have really excelled in that mark. And you look at Walt Weiss and his new coaching staff and kind of the new, I guess, version of the Braves that we've been introduced to here in 2026, even if some of the names remain the same. I think it's been quite a great job by everybody to assemble, to do their part, and they know there's a lot of baseball left, but we've had a lot of fun thus far, and hopefully there's some good months ahead.
Yep. We're going to jump on into this. As your endeavors, when you do 92.9 and all that stuff, how do you work your schedule into that? We're getting just started as a podcast here, and before we get into the Braves, we're kind of wanting to know how you juggle all this, because we have noticed it's a lot of work to get on all this stuff. So how do you do it, Grant?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, I've been doing radio since really 2005 was the first season I worked in organized baseball. I started with the Braves Radio Network. I was behind the scenes for 4 years there. Then I went down to the minor leagues. And if you talk about doing all the work and doing your stuff yourself, I did play-by-play for 4 years, and that was a lot of fun as well, because that's been kind of my dream and my passion around baseball. I love getting the opportunity to do it here and there when it still presents itself, but just figuring out, where to kind of fit and how to grow a brand was kind of something I was really still figuring out as recently as 2012, 2013. Social media obviously helps out a lot with that, but it's just kind of finding opportunities, stacking it up, and then hopefully giving people the kind of content that they want. I mean, I love telling stories about baseball, so interviews are fun. I love diving into the numbers. I love, going through the nostalgia of yesteryear and kind of diving into all of that, because baseball is a sport that I think more than any other sport allows you to kind of enjoy, a lifetime of being a fan or a follower of the sport. So just kind of trying to weave all of those things together. I'm pretty good at editing audio, so that certainly helps when it comes to podcasting and producing and that. And if you spend 20 years doing something, hopefully you pick up a few things that help you along the way to do it at a proficient level. And I do feel like I've got a pretty good ear for it. And then just kind of enjoying it as well, because it is a passion. It is a privilege to be able to do it, to be able to go to the ballpark on a regular basis. I never try to lose sight of that. And yeah, just enjoying it, because like I said, this has been kind of a lifelong dream of being able to work in this sport. And hopefully I've got quite a few more chapters and quite a few more miles and years ahead of me.
Yeah, hopefully get a 2026 World Series for you at the end
Like that.
of this. Yeah. Erin?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question for you. So when you were first starting out in your career, covering a team professionally and then going into content creation as well, what is something that you wish someone had told you when you were first beginning everything?
I think one of the biggest things was finding my voice, and that was kind of an ongoing process. It took a number of years, because when you first walk in and you're around people that have done it every day, and you walk into a clubhouse with players that you watched on TV, and now all of a sudden it's the opportunity there to talk and converse with them on a regular basis and start to, carve out a niche of some sort. And that took a while for me because I never want to waste people's time. I never want to ask dumb questions. I don't think anybody wants to, but kind of building up that confidence. I think that I probably could have maybe done a little bit more a little sooner, but I also benefited greatly from a lot of the people I was around because when I started with the Braves Radio Network, I was still in the Skip Carey, Pete Van Wieren, Don Sutton, Joe Simpson years, and that for me was a connection to my childhood. So even standing in the back of the room and just watching, I was able to learn and to gather up a lot. And then as I would go to spring training, all of a sudden I'm getting to drive around Florida with Pete Van Wieren and hear him tell stories for years and years. And you make friends with different former players. Mark Lemke was incredibly kind and generous with me with his time and kind of sharing his stories of some of those great Braves days. So you start to feel like you belong a little bit. And then I felt like comfortable enough to say, hey, I kind of want to do this play-by-play thing. And Chip Carey was somebody who gave me a lot of time for that. The first innings of baseball, professional baseball I ever called were beside Chip Carey. And I could not get through the lineups the first time because I was just so nervous because again, you don't want to make a mistake. You don't want to say anything wrong. And he said, look, this is, this game, you understand the sport. We all borrow from one another all along. So just kind of figure out what works for you, but just be yourself. And that helped me get into the game, get through those lineups, and ultimately go out and do that for 4 years and then come back and do the reporting and the hosting and the shows and the interviews and all the things that have followed. So starting out, I think it's just knowing yourself well enough to take chances, to, measured chances, but be confident enough to go out there and do it because we're all going to fail at different times or just maybe not reach our standard. But you can learn so much more from that than the things you already knew how to do. And that, I think, would probably be some of the advice I'd give to anybody that's just starting out is just having the confidence to get the conversation started and to, step out there, I guess, kind of on that stage, if you will, and be comfortable with who you are and know that you're in process. We're all in process. We're all still growing. We're all still polishing those skills. Even to this day, I would love to be, at a next level or hope that there is a next level that I can get to if I just continue to work at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm in like that beginning stage now. I had the chance to cover the Atlanta 400 Gala this year, and that was my first like big credentialed opportunity, and I was terrified and shaking. And that was a couple of months ago, and now the more that I interact with people in the organization, it does get easier. So you're right, just keep going and finding your voice is definitely a big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and we've had multiple of y'all come on. We only have a podcast for 70 days, Grant, and our numbers are already through the roof. And I've talked to some of the ones who've had it a long time. And they're amazed, but all of you have come on here have said the same thing: stick to who you are, trusting what you're doing, and so they're really good words. Andrew, what you got?
Yeah, Grant, thanks for coming on. But to kind of piggyback a little bit off of what Erin was asking, everything you've done and what you said, you've done lots of content creation where sports journalism, sports broadcasting, podcast, going on the radio, and now with how big of social media social media is today and how all that influences today. What's your most favorite part of content creation that you've gone through?
Gosh, I mean, if I look back on the things that I love and remember the most, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about my minor league baseball experience in those 4 years and riding those buses and meeting guys, at a different stage of the game. Because keep in mind, I had just been working at the big league level, but not really doing necessarily what I wanted to do. So it was beneficial to me to go to the minor leagues or for me to go to the minor leagues. And we kind of had that kinship where we just get to talking, and I got to know the sport on a very intimate level because when you're down there, everybody's working on something, and it is like a tiny community. You're on the buses, you're traveling city to city, and I met guys like Stephen Vogt and Alex Cobb and Kevin Kiermaier, guys who would go on to become World Series champions and all-stars and, play 10 plus years in the big leagues, win platinum gloves, stuff like that. And that's just a handful of the guys that I saw. But, you're just meeting them and you start to understand like, hey, we're just all people. We're all working in this sport. We all love this sport. And it just kind of, it builds. It's like I was finally able to really kind of grasp, okay, there's the business side of this that I'm learning as I'm going along, but there's also this community side that I like an awful lot. So I think that was probably where I was just enjoying on a daily basis that blank canvas to get to call a game and to think about, the influences of my youth, which again was the Skip Carey, Pete Van Wieren, Joe Simpson, Ernie Johnson, Don Sutton, kind of years of hearing the Braves, on those summer nights, just listening to the radio after I was told to go to bed and turn off TBS. Those were the kind of things I was kind of getting to tap in on and see exactly how deep those roots ran. And I certainly enjoyed that opportunity. And I would, again, love to have a chance to do it more than I do. But radio, television, different sports, writing, all of those things have just kind of been continuing to try to find ways to challenge myself. Starting to do work with the Falcons Radio Network last year was kind of that next evolution for me, because I work at a station that doesn't have the rights to the baseball team that I cover, but they do have the rights to a football team. And I feel like, in the words of Liam Neeson and Taken, I have a very particular set of skills, and I wanted to try to use those again in that regard. So it was fun to kind of stretch myself out of my comfort zone and to find ways to continue to, just be a part of the industry that I love so much, which is radio and television and obviously working in sports media.
And for those Braves fans out there, if you're a football fan, which we're in the South, so most of that would be almost all of us, follow Grant. He does a great job during the NFL season. I'm a Vikings fan, Andrew's a Falcons fan, but we interact with him. He does a great job. So let's get to what everybody wants to talk about, the 2026 Braves. Best record in baseball, 45-21. We're 9.5 up on the Phillies, and the Mets are rear distance 15.5 behind us. Just a 27,000-foot view. What is your overall feel of the team this year?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when we were talking, it's kind of getting going here, is that this has been a team that's just been very complete. And even in the areas in which they've been challenged with injuries and not having maybe the, plan A that they wanted to have, they've just done such a good job, Alex and his team did, of roster construction this year. I feel like the Braves have their best bench that they've had since the Martin Prado, Omar Infante days, the Eric Hinsky, those years back in the late, I guess, aughts, if that's the first decade of this millennium, and then into the 2010s. But then that kind of started to change, and obviously the Braves have some great everyday guys that don't want an inning off as well, and those guys have played really well. We've seen more out of Ozzie and Michael Harris. Those were going to be two big questions for us. Austin Riley hasn't gotten going yet. Ha-Seong Kim, I don't think has played anywhere close to the level that he's going to be capable of and at some point make a contribution to this club as well. And clearly the catching situation with Drake Baldwin looked great, but now you got to overcome an injury, and you had the other guy, Sean Murphy, that you were hoping to get back, having to overcome injury as well. Ronald Acuna Jr.'s had some peaks and valleys, and that's kind of something that happens to everybody. No matter how great you are, you're going to go through that kind of stuff. But through it all, you look at some of the guys that have stepped in that you didn't expect to make a big impact, whether that it was Dom Smith or Jorge Mateo or Mauricio Dubon, I think above and beyond just about everybody, or Mike Yastrzemski here or there, or some of the bullpen guys that have stepped in addition to some of the big leverage at the end. And then the rotation has overcome some losses and been able to continue to post. So you have a team that's pitched really well. You have a team that's hit really well. You have a team that's fielded really well. But I've continued to ask this on my show, and I'm sure you guys have probably spent some time thinking about it. Have we even seen the best version of the 26 Braves? I think that's the question that I'm really fascinated to answer as the summer goes on, because I do think individually and collectively, there's some other levels that this club maybe hasn't hit yet as far as their stride.
Yeah, 45-21, and I think everybody in Braves country thinks we can be a little bit better. And I think it really hinges on the two big superstars, Acuna and Riley, not seeing their full potential. But yeah, this is a very special team and a long way to go, but we can do big things. Erin?
Grant, something that's really interesting to me is our record on the road. We're 23-10 on the road and then 22-11 at home. Usually there's a home field advantage there, but do you think that this road record is something that is giving us the difference and the it factor for a postseason run this year?
I think that's one of the big things. I talked about that at length on my show yesterday when I was just looking at the overall record, and I don't really start delving into it too terribly much until we get to Memorial Day, and I feel like we've got a good chunk, a good sample size to kind of decide who or what a team is, or maybe what they haven't done well yet. But whether they're home or the road, the Braves have played extremely well. I mean, they're basically winning 2 out of every 3 games, no matter where they're going. The comeback victories as well. When I think about, the hallmarks of a winning club and a team that you can get excited about when it matters, it's all right. Well, are the rallies there? Are the excitement? Are the moments there for this team? Do they have that knack for the clutch hit? or the big strikeout or whatever it is, whether offensively or pitching wise. Do they make the big play? And I just feel like the Braves have checked all of those boxes thus far. And, when you've gone this far into the season, you're the second week of June now, and you've lost 2 series. I mean, it's bordering on some of the great Braves teams that we've seen of those 90s and early 2000s era, that 14 straight division titles run. And you can start to, I think, dream on that when you get this far into a season. So, yeah, their ability to play on the road warriors, if you want to call them that, taking care of business at home, and also kind of having those moments and those comeback victories, it's pretty much all, I think, percolating the way that the Braves want it to this point, and we'd obviously love to see some more of it.
Yeah, and the thing about it is the 2003 Braves, Grant, was the team that all of us who are really Braves fans knew that was a team that should have won a world championship. And it's funny how all their numbers, this great start, keep equaling the 2003 Braves, because they were great. And hopefully we'll have a better postseason than that did. Andrew?
Yeah, so kind of a weird season that we've had so far. The American League's not all that great. Aaron Judge is now out for the Yankees for probably a long time. Never know. But the National League is really good. But it's really centered around, in my opinion, 3 teams: the Braves, the Dodgers, and right now, the Milwaukee Brewers. Out of those 3 teams, Grant, who do you think is the best team out of the 3?
Yeah, it's interesting because they're 3 very different teams. I mean, the Brewers have had this success and this run where it just feels like they do every little thing well. They run well. They have good pitching. They're not going to overpower you, but they can still, run into one when they need to. I just like the way that club plays the game of baseball. It's a fun version. Meanwhile, the Braves had kind of been that team that, all right, well, we're going to wait. We're going to outslug you, and we're going to hopefully pitch well, and that's going to be our hallmarks. But now all of a sudden, this is a Braves team that isn't overly reliant on the home run, but they still hit their fair share of home runs, but they've done a lot of the other little things well. They've succeeded in the margins, or in the aggregate, as I like to call it, because it's not always the big one swing gets you 3 runs kind of Braves team that we saw in maybe 2023. 2003 was very good at that as well. Meanwhile, with the Dodgers, I mean, you're supposed to get what you pay for, right? And they have paid more than anybody else. They've got pretty much a superstar everywhere you look, but they've run into their own pitching problems. They needed to get a lot more out of Roki Sasaki, and all of a sudden they are. Shohei Ohtani looks like he's pitching a Cy Young caliber, and all of a sudden offensively he's starting to catch a little bit of fire and find his stride, which I think everybody expected him to do. But that's a team that you expect them to be there because they've been there in the past, and obviously they put the payroll up there. But right now it's really hard to tell, because I think that's the beauty of it, is you can look at everybody's different contrasting styles and wonder who would win a 3-game series. Okay, now who would win a 5-game series? And now I want to know who would win a 7-game series. And I think those are 3 teams that obviously have the October aspirations. They have the October experience. But it's kind of hard to tell right now. But I'm not going to tell you that either one of the Brewers or the Dodgers are in any measurable way better than the Atlanta Braves right now. And typically, I try to err on the side of caution and say, okay, the Braves have done X, Y, or Z, but you have to tip your cap or give respect to what other guys have done. But I really just don't think there is a better baseball team in Major League Baseball right now than the Atlanta Braves, and it owes to the completeness of the way that they are playing. I just don't see anybody who plays a complete game of baseball better than the Braves are right now in all the phases.
Yeah, I agree. It's just phenomenal. I think all 3 teams are really good, and I listened to the Dodgers broadcast Saturday night, and Earl Hershiser brought it up. He said those 3 teams right now are a little above everybody else, and depending on injuries. So we look to this. I know they're going to ask about the players, but I'm a coach, so I got to ask about the coaches. I love what Weiss has done. And I was a friend with Brian Snicker. Some people in Braves country know Bobby Cox's family lives next to my daughter and my son-in-law. So I got to know the Braves, and so huge Snit fan. But what Walt has done with this team, taken to the next, is amazing. I think he's going to be up for Manager of the Year, but I also want you to touch base on Alex, because I think Alex is going to be up for Exec of the Year, because everything he's done seems to be hitting. Those 2 guys specifically, Grant, what do you think about them?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because what was all the dialogue that we had over the winter was, all right, are we excited about this hire? Not really. This is the guy that stood behind or beside Brian Snitker for 8 years, and it's basically the same thing, and you could have gone outside the organization and changed the voice altogether, but I feel like just from talking to people around the team, including an opportunity to sit down with Walt at the winter meetings, kind of knowing obviously the way Brian Snitker was, growing up on understanding what Bobby Cox and his influence was to so many players and coaches in this organization. You know what the Braves are really looking for. And Alex, while he came in, prior to the 2018 season and wasn't a long time, Braves aficionado or constituent, he grew up in very different circumstances in the game, but he knows a good thing when he sees one. And I think he appreciates the consistency and the continuity that they've been able to build from a coaching staff standpoint. So when I talked to Walt at his introductory press conference, my question was, you played for Bobby Cox, you played for Tony La Russa, you've played and coached with a number of great managers over the years. What do you take from them that's going to help you in this opportunity, your second opportunity to manage at the big league level? Because clearly the Braves have different expectations than the Rockies did at that time when Walt got his first job. And he said, I take a lot from those guys, but the important thing is all of this needs to be my voice, my messaging, what I believe in, what our coaching staff sets out to do every day. The lessons and the experience is great. It gets you so far, but I think it's the practical application of all of that. And I felt like that's a really pragmatic answer, because you're not trying to be Bobby Cox. You're not trying to even be an extension of Brian Snitker per se. And even though there's a lot of love and respect between the two of them, Walt has a way that he likes to do things. And I think we've seen that. I think he leans a little bit more into getting the information and making his decisions based on that. And Alex and his front office, I think they do a really nice job of creating the reports and getting the information into the hands of Walt, into the hands of the coaching staff, who can then get it into the hands of the players. And that's an important conversation. I think that every club kind of has to find that balance of how hitters like to have information. Is there too much information and that kind of thing? So it's just been really fascinating to have conversations around like how those things are done. But before I get completely off track and lost in the weeds of all of this and the little minutia and things that I like to talk about on my show, I just really feel like there's a lot of credit to the pitching staff that, flows through what Jeremy Hefner has done coming over. Not a knock on Rick Kranitz. Everybody loved and respected Rick, and they just wanted to do something different, the same way they wanted to do something different hitting-wise when they changed from Kevin Seitzer to Tim Hires. And that group, I think, has garnered a lot of praise and a lot of respect. And it takes a minute for that hitting environment and that language to really, I think, take root. And I went around and asked a lot of different Braves about how they've acclimated to that now, knowing and having experience, and they all raved about how Tim Hires gets them prepared, how he works with them in the ways that they need to, presents the information that he knows they need in the way that they need to hear it, that kind of thing. And all of that adds up. All of it's valuable. So this coaching staff, I think, has been incredible. That's just naming a few of the guys that are ahead of those groups. But, Alex caught a lot of heat for not going out and getting more pitching, not signing some of these free agents. And now, in hindsight, which is how everything is viewed, I'm kind of glad he didn't sign some of these guys, because they haven't really been that great, and they haven't been better than the guys that the Braves had in-house that they ended up plugging in. But, you're free to be skeptical of your level of optimism about Martin Perez getting a whole bunch of starts, or Grant Holmes coming off an elbow injury that he didn't have a surgery for, or Reynaldo Lopez's shoulder that has now taken him out of the rotation because the consistency hadn't really been there, and put him into the bullpen. If he kind of told me those things were going on, that, hey, Reynaldo Lopez had to be moved to the bullpen, and some of the other things, if you told me that on, say, March the 1st, I wouldn't think that we'd be talking about the Braves having the best record in Major League Baseball. I'll just leave it at that.
No, and Alex getting Martin Perez has been a lifesaver, and him wanting to come back to us after we released him was really good on Martin's part. One of the coaches that I love and doesn't get enough credit is Tommy Watkins. I don't know if I've seen a third base coach be 100%, but he's about as close as can be. Grant, just phenomenal job through the coaching staff. And I know Erin's going to probably ask, does Tommy come from Minnesota? And Erin's a big Byron Buxton fan, so I'll let her take it, because I think she wants to ask about where we may go and what we may add.
Yeah, going back to like you talking about people criticizing AA for not adding starting pitchers. I completely agree. All of those free agents are not looking great, and some of them are injured. But anyway, the trade deadline is coming up. So in your opinion, how do you think AA is going to move? What kind of positions do you think that he's going to make his priority as targets? And what do you think is going to happen in general for the Braves?
Yeah, it's really interesting, but I do think that the trade deadline is going to begin with starting pitching and the search for finding somebody, a veteran guy that's been there and done that you can pair with Chris Sale. And you hope that Spencer Strider will continue to, no pun intended, make strides this year to look much more like the complete version that he's working so hard to be, and the pitcher that you're expecting to see as far as he's concerned. Bryce Elder has, I think, silenced a lot of doubters thus far and pitched some really valuable innings, but I still feel like if you are looking at a club that's done the things the Braves have, and you've got the capital to go out and pay somebody a little bit, pick up a big salary because it's prorated, and you didn't spend all of your money, I don't think, in the offseason, and then you kind of got a windfall from Jurickson Profar's bad decision making. What can you do with that money? Can it be something where, hey, well, not only did we pick this guy up with the 3 months left in this year in mind, but also whatever his contract's going to be next year? I think that's kind of some of the calculus that could come in that as well once we get on the other side of whatever the CBA is. But I think pitching's the number one thing that you look at. Adding another bullpen arm would be nice, but at least you've built a great foundation and a great group that you feel really good about thus far. But I'm always curious because Alex said something in 2023 that kind of caught me by surprise, which was we were out there trying to get another bat. Get another bat to the greatest offensive team that we may ever see put on a Braves uniform. That would have been an interesting decision. It ultimately didn't end up happening, but I think this year more than any year we've seen in the past, and I know the Braves have been in position in the postseason, talk that you expected them to do something at the deadline, and maybe that was, not anything that really moved the needle. I think this year feels a lot more like that year where that move could be out there. But if I were to just look at one group where I'd say, if you focus here, it might just be the X factor come October. I think it's getting that one more proven starting pitcher.
I agree. I think all of us talking heads, whether it's a podcast, radio, television, we had CJ on. It seems like that's the one thing that we really could put us over the top and separate us from the Dodgers, really compete with the Dodgers. Mm-hmm. So, Andrew, what you got?
Yeah, and as we're just talking about the roster externally, maybe in the next 6 weeks, 2 months, we got a lot of things coming sooner than later with the current roster and what we had, especially at the catching position. That's just kind of been all over the place the last 3 weeks. But when Baldwin comes back, whether it's maybe starts a rehab assignment this week or it comes back maybe next week, who do you think backs him up, between the current catchers that we currently have or maybe someone externally until maybe Sean Murphy comes back? Where do you see that happening?
If I had to pick between the two that they've got right now, I kind of feel like Sandy Leon may be that guy. But it's maybe a case of 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other, because clearly we've seen some. I mean, I didn't necessarily think they were going to be able to find anything that was going to represent an upgrade over Chadwick Trump, and that may not be the most encouraging thing that's ever been said about the catching position. But when you're into your third, fourth, and fifth different guy that you're trying to mix in there, as the Braves are at this point, because now you're down Baldwin, and you don't have Murphy, unlike the start of the year where at least you had Baldwin and you weren't as concerned about the second layer of it. But getting Drake back, I think that there's obviously some motivation for Walt to DH him a little bit, not put too much wear and tear on him. Murphy, I saw, is out of his cast, but he is wearing a splint, and I asked Walt Weiss kind of, what does that mean as far as his, prognosis, and he said really nothing had changed, and that the 2 months that they expected him to be out is still that expectation. So we're probably just doing some quick math, 4 weeks or so away from hearing anything substantial about Murphy's timetable changing. So that means that Drake Baldwin is probably going to catch quite a bit as we expected to see. And you're just hoping to get whatever you can otherwise. But I'll give the Braves catchers a lot of credit. They have a very tough job that's, it may sound like lip service, but it's not, to support the pitching staff and for the pitching staff to be comfortable with them. And I definitely have loved Sandy Leon's impact on the Braves' ABS challenges, which were not a lot of fun to watch over the first couple of months, because he's done an outstanding job of that, and he's got a very long resume of being a capable catcher at the big league level. Just offensively speaking, yeah, you'd love to have more, but if you're getting what you're getting from other guys, I think it's easier to allow that position to kind of work itself out, especially once you get Drake Baldwin back, and whether that's 10 or 12 days or 2 weeks, it does sound like he's trending in the right direction. And talking to Drake this past week, it does seem like he's going to get his baseball activities ramped up soon. It's just obliques are a very temperamental injury, so there's no reason to rush him, but you also really, really would like to have him back because it changes the complexion of that position. And I think he's got an all-star case as well, and I'd love to see him get that start.
Yeah, I agree. I think Drake getting back is huge for us. And speaking of the All Star, interesting thing come out today. Touching on, we have 10 guys, in my opinion, who are deserving of an All Star. Now, being deserving and getting into the All Star are two different things. The 10 guys being Drake, Olsen, Ozzy, Michael Harris. I think Mauricio Dubon keeps making a strong case to be considered there. I really do wish the All Star team had a utility All Star because all the teams have a guy like that. Pitching staff, Sale, Elder, and the back three of our bullpen. That's 10 guys. Jim Bowden come out today and said 5 would make it. I think it's somewhere in between. I'm going to give Jim a little slack. He has to watch 30 teams where we get to watch one on a daily basis. What about the All-Star situation, Grant? What do you think is going to pan out here as we go along?
I think that the locks are Chris Sale, Drake Baldwin, and Matt Olson for sure. And then after that, I think you just start making different cases. Now, Ronald could change the whole thing because there's a fan vote and he's a popular player. So stranger things have happened than him getting voted in as a starter. And, look, you're never going to hear me say I don't want to see Ronald Acuna Jr. play the game of baseball. I think it's a lot of fun to watch him do that, especially now that he's started getting himself going again. So a patented Ronald, hot month between now and when the All-Star game gets going. Wouldn't surprise me at all to see him in that mix. You're right about the back end of the bullpen. I feel like Dylan Lee's the guy that maybe hasn't had his praises sung quite the same way because both Robert Suarez and Raisel Iglesias have been, basically star closers in their career. But, man, Dylan Lee has done some heavy lifting for the Braves out there, and it's been very impressive to watch. But I don't know about center field either because, you look at Michael, and he's got such a great argument for it, but Andy Pages has also been terrific there. And, center field can end up being kind of a stacked position, and there's a lot of outfielders in general. So I don't know how the roster construction will go for the NL All-Star team, but if the Braves don't have at least 5, I will be very surprised. I think it could be as many as 7 or 8 like they had a couple of years ago, but it would be probably a crime against the sport if you don't see at least 5 Braves representing the National League in the All-Star game.
I agree. And on that broadcast, Oral Hershiser and Joe Davis brought up the fact Pages and Harris both deserve, but a lot of the country don't know who they are. And they challenged the Dodgers fans to go out and vote for Andy. I challenge the Braves fans, go out and vote for Michael because it might come down to these two big fan bases getting one of them in. So it'll be interesting because both are probably deserving going to the All-Star. Erin?
Yeah.
Going back to, I know you were talking about HSK a little earlier. This is a hot topic of conversation with my audience. Every time, it doesn't matter what I'm posting about, people are commenting about him. Obviously, he's not performing to the level that we expected him to. So my question is, how do you think the Braves evaluate him moving forward? And what do you think the plan is, just in general, working with him, and what would his overall success look like in the second half?
Yeah, Walt talked a little bit about this last week, too, about just, look, we've got Mateo, we've got Dubon, clearly coming out of the gates, Ha-Seong Kim, it wasn't there at the plate. The swing wasn't there. He had some things to iron out, to work on. I'll say the same things that I think are kind of obvious, but maybe get glossed over a little bit. He didn't get to have a normal spring training. He suffered that injury. There's never a good time for an injury, but it kind of derailed a lot of stuff. Then you go down, you work at the complex for a while. You're in the minor leagues for 10 or 12 days, which is not the big leagues. And then you kind of get thrown into, hey, it's a contender. You're the starting shortstop. You make $20 million. Let's see it. And I feel like Ha-Seong Kim has kind of been the kid who missed the bus that's now running behind it while all the other kids are already on there and thinking, all right, well, I got my spot. So I don't know. I mean, obviously his teammates don't feel like it that way, but if there was a visual for it, it kind of feels like Ha-Seong Kim just, the timing hasn't been there. And all jokes aside, I do think he is a useful player, a good player, both defensively, on the base paths, and at the plate. He's shown it in the past, and the Braves saw a little bit of it last September, and we're intrigued enough to bring him back to see if he can be that guy that hits 250, 260, and on bases at a 330 clip and can run into 10 or 15 home runs and maybe steal you 20 bases and play a pretty good shortstop. Will he get to all those numbers after the start? I don't know, but I do think he has an important role to play. And stranger things have happened over the course of 162 than an injury or somebody else's downturn creating an open door and an opportunity for another guy to step up and step in. Mauricio Dubon was the beneficiary of the injury for Hassan Kim. I know they don't necessarily look at it that way. Somebody had to step up, somebody needed to, and he has. But I still think Hassan Kim is of value to this club, and giving him some time to maybe kind of get his legs under him, so to speak, is a smart play, especially when you've got both Jorge Mateo and Mauricio Dubon who can help you out in a variety of different ways and places. It's just nice to have depth because I feel like we've talked about shortstop for years now since Dansby Swanson has been gone, and kind of wondered, all right, well, if this guy hits the skids, what's the option? And there really wasn't a great option. And I love Nick Allen as much as the next guy because he was a great fielding shortstop, but you were getting no offense. But you also had Michael Harris struggling, and Ozzie Albies struggling, and Austin Riley struggling or injured. So it stuck out like a sore thumb. Whereas to go back to what Andrew asked about the catchers, I feel like you can kind of float that for a little while because you have so many other guys that are actually producing right now. And that's kind of a good place to be. And I think that applies a little bit to shortstop, but at least you've been able to plug in some guys who can offensively give you a little bit of a spark, a little bit of a lift while Hassan Kim figures all this out.
Yep. Drew?
Yeah, so we've you just mentioned Dubon. We've had a lot of great other surprises. Mateo, Dubon, Dom Smith, Dylan Lee's been great. Didier Fuentes has been a surprise to all of us. One last roster question. Who has been the biggest surprise on this 2026 Braves team, in your opinion?
That's an interesting question, and you kind of brought out the usual suspects. I mean, I don't know if I'm shocked that Mauricio Dubon has been a useful player. I kind of expected him to be, but offensively, he's, trending for a 90 RBI season. I don't know if he gets there, but that's certainly been impressive. It's been fun to watch that. If I had to choose one that's kind of like the emotional favorite, it's probably Dom Smith because he came along late in spring training. You didn't really know if he was going to fit, if he was going to make the club for sure. It was kind of like, okay, that's a name I know, and he could be useful depth, and maybe he'll go play in Gwinnett, and he'll be okay with that, but he hasn't played in Gwinnett. He's pretty much pushed his way into having the Braves reevaluate the DH position because Walt was even saying this week, I went on record saying I was going to use that as a fluid spot where I was going to just rotate a whole bunch of guys through, but Dom Smith is just too good to not give him some plate appearances. So he's probably my guy as far as the most pleasant of the many surprises for the Braves thus far this year. It's just been, there was that emotional component of getting over the passing of his mother and hitting a walk-off grand slam. And, however you evaluate the different things of your life, it feels like those two things are somewhat connected, emotionally speaking. Baseball just kind of gives you those great moments, and Dom Smith certainly got one, I think, at a time in his life and his career where it was nice to kind of get that push. So it was fun to watch that for him, but it hasn't just been one swing for Dom Smith. He's been putting up professional at-bats all year long. It's been a lot of fun to watch, and the Braves have been the beneficiaries of it as well.
And Dom Smith is a cool fellow. Grant will tell you,
Yep.
you get to talk to him. He's one of the coolest guys you'll ever meet. So we can move on to the White Sox and let them ask their final question they have, but the White Sox have a very good young team. They are missing one of their stars. Murakami's not going to be there this week. But with that said, I'm going to phrase the question this way, Grant, because we're both into this thing. If there was a ball card that you wanted to collect on these young Chicago White Sox, what player would fans need to jump at? Because they're going to see a special player over the next 3 days.
Yeah, they are. I think Colson Montgomery's probably that guy for me. I mean, I know the average may not be there, but a lot of exciting power and infielders that can hit 40 homers. Every club would love to collect a few of those cards on their roster. So I'll go with Colson Montgomery. I think he's been an intriguing bat for them. And as they build this up, they need some guys. They need to really hit on them. And it does look like they have started to kind of reap the benefits of some of their homegrown talent and put up a surprisingly good year thus far. And the Braves are not going to be overlooking them. I can promise you that. It's kind of the same boat that the Pirates are in. And I know the Braves just swept the Pirates, and that kind of is what it is. You didn't face Paul Skeens, so that was probably nice as far as that endeavor is concerned. But yeah, I think the White Sox have been one of the 2 or 3 bigger surprise teams that are doing some stuff this year that maybe nobody saw coming.
Yeah, I think Montgomery's my favorite on that team, and unlucky for the Braves, he's finally got kind of hot the last 4 or 5 days, so he'll be a tough out. Before I let Erin get in here and ask her last question, have you seen Davis Martin pitch? Because I have, and as a old pitching coach, he's got really good stuff, and have you got to see him pitch?
He does. He's been another surprise there. It's not a guy that misses the most bats, but I would say, kind of like Max Fried has been throughout the course of his career, he misses enough that it intrigues you, the stuff he has, and he'll occasionally wander into a big strikeout game, but he works the zone. He's got a very good pitch mix, and as you're building up, you wouldn't be thinking, all right, well, they had to get rid of Garrett Crochet. How exactly are they going to start to rebuild the rotation? And all of a sudden, you got another guy that kind of steps in there and makes you start to look at that whole mix a little bit differently. And, if he's in the running for an ERA title, clearly he's done some pretty good stuff thus far this year. So it's another one of those things where I think the White Sox and their fans at least can say, all right, this product this year is a little bit more fun to watch, and he's been a big reason why.
Yeah, I agree. Erin, you got any last question for Grant?
Yeah, absolutely. So, with this Braves team, there's always something to be talking about right now. But my question is there a certain storyline that you think that we should be paying more attention to rather than, the typical trade rumor and stuff that we are constantly chatting about on X and things like that? Is there something that stands out to you that isn't getting enough attention in your opinion?
That's interesting. I think everybody watches a season and absorbs the product a little bit differently. I think, a lot of times people get hung up on the bad innings and the bad appearance and the disappointing losses. And there are going to be some of those over the course of 162 games. You're probably going to end up being disappointed at least 54 times, if I remember the math correctly. But I don't know. I feel like, each season is kind of its own opportunity to, create and tell a lot of stories. And this Braves team is one that feels very complete thus far, even though they could obviously augment that a little further and make some changes and add some people to it. But the leadership is there, in my opinion. The experience factor has been there. We've seen some bounce back from some guys. We'd like to see maybe a little bit more from others. But overall, I think just kind of enjoying the ride is something I like to remind people to do. We can get caught up in the things that went wrong, but way more things are going right. I mean, Bryce Elder gives up a leadoff home run. I got people in my mentions reminding me that he's not a very good pitcher. I disagree with that. I think he's done a lot of good things this year, and as his start went on, 6 innings of two-run ball, I will take every fifth day if that's what he wants to give you. So maybe just kind of being able to enjoy things a little bit for what they are. Doesn't mean you can't be disappointed, but I feel like we all kind of end up sometimes in this prisoner of the moment mentality that really sucks the fun out of the room for everyone else who's just trying to have a good time. So I would throw that out there. Not going to police anybody, not going to tell them how to fan. I just think that baseball is a lot more fun when you allow for the fact that there's a brand new game tomorrow, even if this one didn't go the way you wanted it to. That's the beauty of the sport, and I think that the Braves have had way more good days than bad days thus far.
Yeah, I agree. And we get on the podcast all the time and say the same thing. You can fan the way you want to, but try to enjoy this ride because you don't get this kind of team, but very rarely come across. Andrew, you got a last question for Grant today?
One last question, Grant. What is your opinion so far on the assessment of Didier Fuentes so far? I mean, I think it's been, in my opinion, just a shock the way he started out in spring training from where he was last year to now. But what's your assessment on Didier Fuentes?
I think everybody that you talk to around the Braves gives him a lot of credit for taking his lumps last year and taking the lessons and the experience out of that, turning it into things to work on in the winter and into the spring, and the arm talent. And I said this on my show yesterday. Outside of Robert Suarez, there is not a more talented arm on the Braves on the Braves pitching staff than Didier Fuentes. And that's with all due respect to Chris Sale. Obviously, the stuff is there, and, he can run it up there in the high 90s as well. It's not a knock on anybody else. It's just from a pure arm talent perspective at 20 years old, this kid has got a lot of the tools that you need to be successful. I am surprised that they chose to go this route and to have him in the big leagues and not starting in the minors. But as it went on, and Walt Weiss said, this used to be a thing where you had a good young pitcher and you kind of broke him into the big leagues in relief. It doesn't mean he won't start again, but can you find something for him to do, to learn, to develop in a way that might be more beneficial than just being in the minor leagues and starting every fifth day again and waiting for an opportunity to start that may or may not come in a timely manner? And they've managed to thread that needle with Didier Fuentes. I didn't expect him to be out there in the pouring rain with a tying run at second trying to get his first save, but there we were on Sunday, and it's just another test that he has passed. So I think he's got mentally the makeup that you need. He's been resilient from last year, being able to just, throw that out to the side and realize it's not always going to go your way. and then make the adjustments to his arsenal that he has as well. Because you can throw hard, but you got to have those other pitches. And I think as he develops that to deal with left-handers a little bit more, left-handed hitters, I think we'll start to see the Didier Fuentes that could become a dominant starting pitcher and a big factor in the rotation as well. So I like the way that they've done it, even if when they showed up at spring training, I would not have expected it to play out this way. You asked me about pleasant surprises for the Atlanta Braves. Didier Fuentes is certainly on the short list of those. He's been terrific, and it's exciting to have those kind of arms that you can start to grow into something as the season goes along. And as we saw, maybe they won't be afraid to give him some more responsibilities when they need to.
From the pitching coach side of it, I think it's beneficial. I know Max talked about it pitching out of the bullpen because it's easier to start a game when the crowd's not filled up yet. When you've come in the 7th and 8th inning and you've got those big crowds going crazy, this will help Didier. And let's just not worry about where it's going to be in 27. He may be back and be top end of rotation, might be in the bullpen. That's next year's problems, and they'll figure it out. So with that said, we're really proud and happy to have you on here, Grant, and hope you enjoyed it. And we follow you.
Absolutely.
And anything you got to add before we get out of here?
No, I don't think so. I appreciate you guys making some time to have me on the show. It was great to talk Braves with everybody. I love doing it. So if you haven't checked out From the Diamond, please do, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find me from 5 to 7, usually on Sundays. It's a live show on 92.9 The Game. I write for Battery Power, and occasionally I do some TV with 11 Alive here in Atlanta. I got to do that yesterday, too, so that was kind of fun. Just a little bit of everything. So if you're looking to find the best way to follow me, at Grant Mcauley on most social media platforms. And if you like baseball cards, I open those as well. So that's probably everything I got as far as the plugging variety goes.
He needs to plug it. He's great. I love following him in all of them, so I don't ever miss him. So I appreciate him coming on, and we love you, Braves Country, and we're out of here. And as always, peace.
You know what, boys? You guys are going to be world champions for the rest of your life.